I wiped the tears from my eyes and told my husband, I never asked you for money or your time. I just wanted your support. Then I closed the front door and climbed into my sister's car. My name is Claire Mitchell. I live in a small town outside Charlotte, North Carolina, with my husband, Martin. We have 2 grown children, Brian and Bria, who have families of their own and live on opposite sides of the country. For most of my adult life, I defined myself by 2 roles, wife and mother. And I took both roles seriously. If there was something I could do to make life easier for my family, I did it. I volunteered to be room mom at my children's schools. I organized my husband's office Christmas party every year. I coached soccer despite knowing absolutely nothing about the sport when I started. If there was a problem to solve or a responsibility to shoulder, I volunteered for it. And I did all of that while working a full-time job. I never complained about it because I believed I was doing what was right. I'd been raised to believe that family came first and that a good wife and mother put everyone else's needs before her own. So that's exactly what I did. When my children were toddlers, I remember sitting down one evening and realizing the amount we spent on childcare every month could practically fund a second household. I've always had an entrepreneurial streak. The idea hit me almost immediately. Why not start a home daycare? I researched everything: licenses, insurance, startup costs, regulations. I created a plan and presented it to Martin like I was pitching a business to investors. To his credit, he listened to the entire presentation. Then he told me why it wouldn't work. Every objection he raised had an answer. You aren't a licensed caregiver. I've already started the licensing process. We don't have the money. I've been saving for months. Where are you going to get clients? I've already spoken to several mothers who would love to use me. We went back and forth for over an hour. Finally, Martin sighed. Claire, after working all day, I don't want to come to a house full of hollering kids. I hardly want to come home to my own kids. It's a nice idea, but it's just not going to work. I tried bringing it up again later. Then again, and again. The answer never changed. No. Eventually I gave up. That was the first dream I walked away from. But it wouldn't be the last. Over the years I brought Martin several more ideas. A cleaning business, writing children's books, a few others that never made it beyond the planning stage. Sometimes he'd tell me I lacked experience. Sometimes he'd tell me the timing wasn't right. Sometimes he'd point out flaws I'd overlooked. But no matter how different the idea was, the outcome was always the same. It's not going to work. To be fair, Martin wasn't a bad man. He worked hard. He provided well for our family. He showed up when the kids needed him. The problem wasn't that he wanted me to fail. The problem was that he couldn't imagine me succeeding at something that changed the life we'd built together. Eventually I stopped bringing him my dreams. I just gave up. Then one Christmas party changed everything. For nearly 10 years I had organized Martin's company's annual Christmas party. Every year I supplied the desserts, including my homemade cookies. That year, the CFO's wife, Andrea, walked up to me carrying a plate piled high with them. Claire, I love your cookies. I laughed. Thank you. No, she said, taking another bite. I mean, I love your cookies. They're the highlight of the Christmas party every year. I smiled. Have you ever thought about selling them? The question caught me completely off guard. Selling them? Yes. I laughed. Who would buy my cookies? Andrea looked at me like I had asked the dumbest question she had ever heard. Everybody. I couldn't help but laugh. Before walking away she said, give me your number. I did. You'll be hearing from me soon. After the party I could hardly wait to tell Martin. To me, it felt like someone had finally seen something in me. When I finished telling him, he sat quietly for a moment. Then he said what he'd always said. It won't work. As he launched into his usual list of reasons, something unexpected happened. I stopped listening, not because I was angry. Because I was done. For the first time in years, I wasn't looking for permission. I was simply informing him. By the time he finished talking, I just smiled and said, okay. 2 days later Andrea called. She asked if I'd thought any more about selling cookies. I told her about the research I'd already done. The calls I'd made. The permits I'd looked into. My tentative launch timeline. She burst out laughing. Claire, I called prepared to convince you to think about starting a business. Well, you already have a business plan. I laughed too. Then I admitted something. I've always wanted to have my own business. Andrea grew quiet. Well, maybe it's time. Something inside me ignited. It felt like a small fire that had been waiting years for a spark. When I got off the phone, I called my sister Helen, my biggest supporter. As soon as I explained my idea, she didn't hesitate. Count me in. Whatever you need, I'm in. So I told her my plan. I would operate out of a commercial kitchen. I'd get my food establishment permit, sales tax permit, insurance, and food safety certifications. My goal was to debut at a farmer's market in the spring. Helen never questioned whether it would work. She only asked what I needed. Over the following months, Andrea, Helen, and I met after work. We made plans, reviewed paperwork, brainstormed branding, solved problems, and little by little something happened that I'd spent years wanting from Martin. They poured into me support, encouragement, guidance, belief, and they did it because they genuinely believed I could succeed. That belief became fuel. At home, life remained largely unchanged. If I went out at night, I told Martin the first was meeting the girls. Technically, it was true. He never asked questions. A few months later, I signed up for my first farmer's market. The morning of the event, my stomach felt like a washing machine full of boots. Every terrible possibility raced through my mind. Nobody would buy anything. People would laugh. I'd embarrass myself. I'd prove Martin right. Then I arrived. I loaded 6 dozen cookies into a wagon and started walking toward my booth. Halfway there, I stopped. I seriously considered turning around. Then I saw Andrea and Helen. They were standing at my booth grinning from ear to ear. They were wearing matching shirts with my business logo printed across the front. Andrea handed me another shirt. Put it on. I looked at her. It's time. And just like that, my dream became real. Over the next 3 hours I sold cookies, answered questions, met other entrepreneurs, and then something unbelievable happened. I sold out. Every single cookie. I was stunned. Andrea and Helen insisted on celebrating. Over lunch we reviewed everything that worked and discussed what needed improvement. When I tried paying them for their help, both refused. Andrea smiled. If you absolutely insist, I'll accept payment in cookies. The next week almost broke me. Rain poured from the sky nearly all morning. Customer traffic was terrible. I sold less than half my inventory. Driving home, I started wondering if Martin had been right all along. Maybe I'd just gotten lucky. Maybe the first week had been a fluke. Then my phone rang. It was Andrea. After listening to me complain for nearly 10 minutes, she finally interrupted. Claire, what? You had one bad day. I sighed. Maybe, not one bad business. The next Saturday I sold out again. And then again. And again. By mid-season demand had grown so much that even with Andrea and Helen helping, I needed 2 additional employees in the commercial kitchen. By November, my booth was one of the most popular attractions at the market. Then came another surprise. A local restaurant approached me about selling my cookies. We met, negotiated, reviewed numbers. After a week we reached an agreement that was profitable for everyone involved. The revenue allowed me to pay my staff, cover kitchen expenses, purchase ingredients and packaging, and still earn a healthy profit. For the first time in my life, I had built something entirely on my own. And I decided it was finally time to tell my husband. I invited Martin to dinner at the restaurant carrying my cookies. After we finished our meal, the waiter approached the table. Would you like dessert? Yes, I said. We'll take the cookies. The waiter smiled. Excellent choice. Then he launched into a glowing description of the local business that made them. He explained the available flavors, the popularity, the quality. I watched Martin nod along. When the cookies arrived, I insisted he try each one. After the first bite, his eyebrows rose. These are fantastic. After the second bite, he smiled. The third earned a full compliment. He even told the waiter they were some of the best cookies he'd had in years and that he would like the check and some of the cookies to go. I couldn't help being amused. I'd made those exact same cookies hundreds of times at home and I never got that reaction. The waiter returned with our check and the boxed cookies. That's when I told him everything. The permits, the meetings, the farmers markets, the long hours, the restaurant deal, the employees, the profits, all of it. I explained how a conversation at a Christmas party had become a thriving business in less than a year. When I finished speaking, Martin simply stared at me. You did all this? I nodded. Without me? I nodded again. His gaze shifted to the cookies. Everyone knew except me. The restaurant suddenly felt very quiet. For several seconds neither of us said anything. Then Martin slowly opened his wallet. He took out $200 bills and placed them on top of the check. He stood, turned, and walked out. He left the cookies, And he left me sitting there alone. For nearly 15 minutes I sat at that table trying to understand what had happened. Yes, I had started a business he didn't support. Yes, I hadn't told him. But I hadn't neglected any of my responsibilities. I still worked, still managed the house, still supported him, still did everything I'd always done. I called Helen, then Andrea. By the time they arrived, both were furious. I wasn't. I was hurt, disappointed, confused, mostly sad. Helen offered me her guest room. Andrea said she was heading over too. Before we left, I asked if we could stop by my house. There were a few things I needed to grab. When I walked inside, Martin was sitting on the couch nursing a glass of bourbon on the rocks. Watching a television wasn't even on. I packed a small overnight bag and headed back into the living room. Martin hadn't moved. I stepped in front of him. Do you know what hurts the most? For the first time since I got home, he looked directly at me. For years, I brought my ideas to you because your opinion mattered more than anyone else's. My voice cracked. Every time I came to you excited about something, you gave me reasons not to try. Tears filled my eyes. I never asked you for money. I paused. I never asked you for your time. I wiped the tears from my face. I just wanted your support. Then I turned around, walked out the front door, and climbed into Helen's car. The following week was one of the hardest of my life. Helen and Andrea surrounded me with love and encouragement. But life doesn't stop because you're hurting. The business still needed attention. Employees still needed leadership. Orders still needed filling. So I kept moving. A week later Martin called. He asked if we could talk. We met at the restaurant that sold my cookies. When I arrived, he stood and handed me a bouquet of white roses. My favorite. Then he apologized, not just for the restaurant. For everything. He took a deep breath. Claire, I was selfish. I stared at him. He continued. Every time I'd brought him an idea, he saw risk. He saw change. He saw the possibility of failure. Rather than confront those fears, he had projected them onto me. Then he admitted something even harder. He didn't want me investing time and energy into something that wasn't centered around him or the family. Over the years, he'd grown comfortable with a version of Claire whose life revolved around making his easier. Hearing him say it out loud hurt. But it also explained so much. His eyes welled with tears. I should have supported you. For the first time in years, I believed him. That night we talked more openly than we ever had during our 25 years of marriage. There were tears, raised voices, long silences, even a few laughs. By the time we finished, the restaurant was preparing to close. 6 months later, my business was thriving. We had expanded into multiple restaurants and specialty stores. I spent more time managing operations than baking cookies. Martin and I both attended therapy individually and together. Our marriage wasn't perfect, but it was healthier than it had been in years. More importantly, I was healthier. For most of my life, I believed I needed someone else's permission before I could chase my dreams. I thought confidence came from being supported. I know better now. Support is a beautiful thing when you can get it. But belief? Belief starts with you. And for the first time in my life, I finally believed in myself.